Ansar Hussain, As-Salam. Ansar Hussain.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Habib Qulubina wa Ashrafil Anbiya Muhammadin al-Mustafa wa alihi al-Tayyibin al-Tahirin. Ar-Rahmanu allama al-Quran, khalaqa al-insan, allamahu al-bayan. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. When we go through what has reached us from the history of our beloved Prophet and our Imams, we can see that they have their enemies. There are indifferent people in their stories, and they all have companions. But when we look at the stories, there are a whole range of different people that are all called companions. For example, in the time of the Prophet, Abu Sufyan was a clear enemy of the Prophet, at least before Fath of Mecca, before conquering the Mecca, where he accepted Islam by force. And then there are many, many people who are indifferent, but they might not be listed because they didn't have a major role in the story, so they're not well documented, even though they are in the majority. And then there are the companions. But are they all the same? Can we put them in the same group just because they're called companions? Do they have the same relationship, same characteristics, same personality? Other than the fact that they were all close to the Prophet. For example, we have Hamza, we have Abu Talib, we have Abbas. These are all uncles of the Prophet. We have Sayyidah Khadija, we have Salama, we have Aisha. These are wives of the Prophet. We have Abu Dhar, we have Abu Bakr, we have Abu Huraira, we have Salman, we have Miqdad, we have Zubayr, we have Talha. These are all companions of the Prophet. But are they all the same? Let's look at some of the stories of these people and see if we can differentiate between them. It is narrated that Abu Jahl saw our Prophet in Masjid al-Haram and started insulting him and insulting Islam. And the Prophet didn't answer. But eventually Abu Jahl got tired of insulting the Prophet and left him alone and sat with his friends. Some woman saw this encounter and narrated this to Hamza, uncle of the Prophet. And Hamza was coming back from hunting. So he gets angry, he goes straight to Masjid al-Haram, he finds Abu Jahl sitting with his friends. He goes straight to Abu Jahl, hits him in the head with his bow and breaks his head and tells him, "You dare insult Muhammad? Don't you know that I have accepted Islam and I'm his supporter?" And apparently this is where Hamza expressed that he's a Muslim for the first time. He was supporting the Prophet, but not as a Muslim before this. So you can see the feeling, the relationship of Hamza in his heart towards the Prophet that is pushing him to act in this way. There were other uncles of the Prophet, even though they supported the Prophet, they were taking a more conservative approach. And some might say that that was necessary for that situation, that context. It was part of the strategy, part of the force. But even with that, the difference is there. Now, when we look at the wives of the Prophet, we have Salama, who is always mentioned as one of the lovers of Ahlul Bayt. She's one of the special wives of the Prophet. She's been trusted with secrets of the Prophet and Imams on several occasions. And I'll go back to this lady at the end of my talk today. She was the only one, she was one of the only ones who supported Lady Fatima in front of Abu Bakr after the Prophet, and she was denied her share of Baytul Mal that year because of this support. On the other hand, we have other wives of the Prophet who openly expressed jealousy towards Ahlul Bayt. And some of them started wars, actual wars, in the time of Imam Ali at the beginning of his government. When we look at the companions of the Prophet, we have Abu Dhar, who is one of the top 5, top three always in the ahadith. And Uthman, the third Khalifa, tried his best to attract his support and his respect. But he couldn't offer anything more than money or status or other dunyavi things. So one time he sent a slave with a bag of gold coins to Abu Dhar and told the slave that if he accepts the gold, if you make him accept the gold, I will free you. So he wanted to give this an ukhravi side, give this deal an ukhravi side and attract the mercy, the rahmah of Abu Dhar. So the slave comes to Abu Dhar and tells him, please accept this. This is from Uthman. He has told me that this is from his own money. This is halal. This is not mixed with haram in any way. And this is not Baytul Mal. Please accept it. And if you accept it, I will be free. Abu Dhar tells the slave that yes, if I accept it, you will be free, but I will become a slave. So you can see his indifference towards dunya, his reluctance towards receiving dunya, and his wisdom in his answer. On the other hand, we had other companions who were called the sword of Islam because of the brevity that they showed in the battles of the time of the Prophet. Even in the incident of attacking Lady Fatima's house, they tried to protect the house. They tried to fight the offenders. But after a while, little by little, they started getting used to getting a special share of Baytul Mal because they were special companions, because they were aqdamin in being a Muslim and being a mu'min. They were getting comfortable with being different with other people. And even in the time of Imam Ali alayhi salam, when they stopped getting that special share from Baytul Mal, they started having problems with Imam Ali. And they stood in front of Imam Ali in the battle of Jamal, and they were killed in that battle. So we can clearly see a range of different people. We can see the ones who are perfect examples of how to be a mu'min, and there are other so-called companions who did things that I would be ashamed to even mention. The same goes for companions of Imam Ali alayhi salam. And to transition from companions of the Prophet to companions of Imam Ali, Uwais Qarani is a very special case. He is a companion of Imam Ali alayhi salam, but he's more famous because of his story with the Prophet. And ironically, the story is he never met the Prophet. So this is why he's mentioned among the tabi'een, meaning people who didn't meet the Prophet himself, but meet the companions of the Prophet. So Uwais was living in Qaran, which is apparently a city in Yemen, with his old mother. And he dearly loved the Prophet. He always wanted to meet the Prophet. So one day he decided to come to Medina to meet the Prophet. So he goes to his mother and asks for permission. His mother, because she's very old, very weak, and she needs Uwais by her side, she allows him to go, but she says, please, when you get to Medina, don't stop for more than half a day in Medina. So under that condition, he starts the journey. He starts the journey towards his beloved. And I can only imagine on that way from Yemen to Medina, just him imagining the encounter with the Prophet, what will happen, what he's going to say to the Prophet, what he's going to hear, all the feelings. So he gets to Medina only to realize that the Prophet is out of town. I cannot imagine how he felt at that moment. But people of Medina told him, please stay the night and you will meet the Prophet tomorrow, inshallah. But he says, no, I've promised my mother to go back, to not stay here for more than half a day. So he waits a little bit and the Prophet doesn't come back and he goes to Yemen without meeting the Prophet. Just imagine meeting the Prophet himself. Just being able to not meet the Prophet because of a simple promise to your mother. This is the level of understanding of Uwais. No justification, like my mother will understand. Like she probably meant if you met the Prophet. No, none of this. Just go straight back to Yemen. This again shows qualities of his heart. It is narrated that the Prophet mentioned Uwais over and over. So much that even in Battle of Siffin, some people left the army of Muawiyah and joined the army of Imam Ali alayhi salam after they realized that Uwais was on the side of Imam Ali. So this is how much Uwais was mentioned by the Prophet and how much ingrained in people's memories he was. And this also shows the madhlumiyah of Imam Ali alayhi salam, how unknown, how misunderstood he was. He must have been mentioned more by the Prophet than Uwais. But because of the propaganda system by Muawiyah, because of the propaganda by Khulafa, the reality was upside down at that time. People would leave the army because of Uwais, not Imam Ali himself. Anyway, another special companion of Imam Ali alayhi salam is Maytham. Maytham Tammar is another very special companion of Imam Ali alayhi salam who had special secrets, secret knowledge from Imam Ali alayhi salam. It is mentioned that Imam Ali took Maytham to a palm tree and told him, Maytham, you're going to have stories with this tree. They're going to crucify you and put you on this tree, and you will die on this tree. So Maytham used to go back to that tree, pray near that tree, and talk to that tree. Said, Allah has created you for me and has created me for you. And it was a couple of weeks before the incident of Karbala. Maytham was coming back from Hajj, and Muslim ibn Aqil was just killed in Kufa. So he was coming back from Hajj to Kufa, where he lived. And Ibn Ziyad was looking for Shias of Ali alayhi salam and imprisoning them and killing them. So they told him there's this Persian lover of Ali, Persian companion of Ali called Maytham, was very close to Ali. So he ordered his men to capture Maytham. And when they brought Maytham to his headquarters, he wanted to belittle Maytham by assuming that he's an idol worshipper because he's from Persia. So he says, where is your God? Aina Rabbuk? And Maytham promptly answers, Labil Mirsad, in the ambush, on the lookout, which is a reference to Surah Fajr. So Ibn Ziyad is astonished by his balagha and fasaha and improvisation based on Quran. So he says, they've told me that you were close to Ali. He says, yes, they are correct. So Ibn Ziyad says, you have to reject him, say that you hate him and insult him, or we'll cut your hands and your feet. And Maytham calmly answers, yes, my master has already told me that you're going to crucify me and you're going to cut off my tongue as well. So Ibn Ziyad says, we're trying to avoid that. We will avoid that for you to know that the foretelling of your master is wrong. So they crucify him and they put him on that palm tree. And he starts calling out to people, gathering them and talking about the merits, the virtues of Imam Ali alayhi salam, and the transgressions, the faults of Bani Umayyah and Ibn Ziyad. After a while, people gathered around him, people started listening to him. So people came to Ibn Ziyad and told him, he's started a scandal. There's no honor left for you or Bani Umayyah. And out of anger, he orders them to cut off his tongue. Salam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to Maytham. So, with any level of attention to these stories, we can clearly see that there are two different groups, at least two different groups of companions. We have the special ones, the pillars, the selected few, the select few, the lovers, the ones who prefer akhirah over dunya, the ones who are seeking akhirah, the ones who are obedient, and we have the companions of appearance. We have the ones who are seeking dunya. We have the ones who love themselves so much that they cannot bear the status, the special place of A'imma for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the Prophet and in Quran. They follow their desires, they follow their limited understanding before they follow the Prophet or Imam. And in the time of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, the situation gets so much worse that even some of the close companions, some of the commanders of his army, accept money from Muawiyah and leave the army of Imam Hassan to join the army of Muawiyah, la'natullah alayhi, which I'm not going to get into the details of in this talk. But when we look at the story of Karbala, when we look at the companions of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, the story is very different. It's a different story. We don't see three groups of companions. We don't see two groups of companions. We only see one group. The devoted, the united companions of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And they're not just a few. The smallest number, the famous number, is 72. But there are narrations that list like 100 people. Up to 500-600 people are narrated to be in Karbala, to have been in Karbala with Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And this is not a small number. This is not trivial. Even 72 devoted people who are ready to sacrifice their lives 1,000 times for their Imam. The history hasn't seen anything like this before or after Karbala. We've all heard that in the night of Ashura, Imam Hussein alayhi salam turned off the torches, the candles, the lights, and told everyone to use the darkness to leave the army if they want, if they have issues, if they have problems, if they want to go for any reason. He told his companions to leave the army. But no one left. He was trying to rid the army, get rid of anyone with impurity. But he showed the history that the army is already perfectly pure. These are the companions of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And on the day of Ashura, he says, "Hal min nasirin yansuruni?" So last night you were trying to get rid of people who are already helping you. And on the day of Ashura, you're trying to gather help from your enemy. Last night he was trying to get rid of the impure among the pure. And today, on the day of Ashura, he's trying to find anyone who has any rahmah, any hope for guidance, not to leave anyone who has purity among the impure. But he shows that the army of the enemy is perfectly impure. So that's why we say on the day of Ashura, the entirety of haqq stood against the entirety of batil. So I told you that I will go back to Salama at the end of my talk. It is narrated that the Prophet ﷺ gave some turba of Karbala to Salama and told her, whenever you saw this turba turn into blood, know that my son Hussein has been killed. So I can imagine Salama, when Imam Hussein left his Hajj undone and went towards Karbala, I can imagine her going back again and again to visit this turba with a restless heart. One day she was taking a nap and she sees the Prophet in her dream. While the Prophet was covered in dust and he was heartbroken. And he says, I'm just coming back from the burial of my grandson. And she wakes up and she goes to find that turba turned into blood. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bifna'ik. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.